We're live.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everybody to our amazing June Pride Month panel. And I am so excited to be sharing this panel with our amazing guests who are going to introduce themselves in just a moment. Our purpose today is to really be exploring and celebrating unique difference and really understanding from our panelists what are some of the very big issues here in 2022 in the June month of Pride. So most of you know I've been a lifelong activist for deep diversity, inclusion, and equity. Long before it was trendy to do so, my first pledge was made in about 35 years ago. And my very first CEOship, where I talked about this with investors, they used to say, "Why are you telling us this, Harriet?" I said, because I think people bringing 100% of themselves or more to work is what we as leaders aspire to. So I'm thrilled to have done this throughout my career. I'm very excited to just give you a thumbnail sketch of each of my incredible guests. First of all, we have the quite incredible Ella Slade. I have been privileged to work with Ella, who leads IBM's global LGBTQ plus across the world. It's a huge job leading volunteers globally to ensure that all of the LGBTQ plus and IBM employees at large can thrive personally and professionally. Ella designates with they, them as her pronouns, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about about their work as we proceed with the panel. So welcome, Ella. Thank you for all that you do. And we'll hear from you in a few moments. And then we have the equally amazing Nikki Simmons. Most of you may know Nikki from her former international hockey playing days, but a real inclusion, equity, and diversity leader now in her own right. And we may even be joined by her new addition to the family, the amazing Ellie Skye, or we may not be if Ellie Skye sleeps. So Nikki, welcome. You can talk a little more about you and your work, but thank you so much for joining us today. And then last, but certainly not least in any sense, we have the wonderful Ankit Bhutani, who is a speaker, a D&I leader, and LGBTQ plus rights activist. He's done TED Talks, talked at the UN, and has been very active in ensuring that there is space, no need to cover, and great love within organizations for people because of their differences. So welcome, Ankit, as well. Sadly, we do not have Deepak today. He had some issues and is unable to join, but we're going to have a rip-roaring discussion. And please post your questions. I'll make sure that all those questions that are posted, we get to answer as best we can. So, Ella, let's start with you. Tell us in your own words what you do and what you think some of the key issues are in 2022 as we celebrate unique difference and pride in this June month.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Harriet, and thanks for having me here alongside Nikki and Ankit. I'm really excited to have this discussion. So, yeah, like you said, Harriet, my role at IBM is IBM's global LGBTQ+ leader. So I sit within their global diversity inclusion team. I'm based in London, but look after the LGBTQ+ community and inclusion of LGBTQ+ employees at large at IBM. So I work with our employees around whatever initiatives they want to focus on. And it really is kind of as simple and complex as that. So whatever the IBMers are coming forward and saying, we want to focus on this, we want to focus on that, I build squads and teams of people around those initiatives to really drive change and really keep momentum on some of these key initiatives. So that kind of in a nutshell is my job. And kind of outside of work, I'm involved in some other great things as well in kind of the inclusion space, such as obviously Mission Beyond that I'm involved in with yourself, Harriet. But I'm also part of England Hockey, and I know there's a hockey connection here with Nikki. I'm part of England Hockey's Equality, Diversity, Inclusion kind of advisory group as well, which is super cool. One thing, or a few things that I think the LGBTQ+ community really needs, or some of the kind of top focus areas, I think, for kind of the coming years for LGBTQ+ equality around the world. I think I would be, remiss if I didn't mention the advocacy efforts and the legislation going on. My role is global, so I really do look after people all over the world. But seeing, obviously, earlier on this year and continuing now, the kind of onslaught of anti-LGBTQ+ bills come forward in the US has been really, really challenging. And people may think it just impacts people in the US. It doesn't. It really has a ripple effect around the world. And we have LGBTQ+ IBMers elsewhere in the world also facing similar local legislative issues as well. But also feeling the impact of, the feeling that people don't want them to have rights. And that is, I think if you're not part of a community that has ever been, criminalized or legislated against in some way, that can be quite difficult to understand how that feels. But knowing that people are putting this forward, people are voting on this, people are debating around this, can be so damaging to people's, own mental health as well. So I'd say the kind of legislation and rights kind of side of things is huge. I would also say healthcare for trans people. It is a gigantic issue around the world when it comes to supporting trans people and their gender affirming healthcare. In the UK, it is pretty much a shambles when it comes to the support for gender affirming healthcare on our National Health Service. As we know, the National Health Service has many issues, and it tries to do the best it can. But what that means is the waiting times to access gender affirming healthcare in the UK is so alarmingly long that basically people are being forced to go private and being forced to crowdfund and try and find money that they can pull together to get these literally life-changing and life-saving procedures. And that was just to pick on the UK, but it's similar in so many other countries and locations around the world as well. So I'd say, yeah, gender affirming healthcare is definitely right up there at the top of the list, along with kind of general legislation. And I'm being quite vague with that because I think there's so many things depending on which country we're looking at, which state we're looking at, and all that kind of thing as well. So they would be my kind of top two, I guess, focus areas in my mind.
Thank you, Ella. And we're going to come back to talk about some of the actions and things that we can do in support of trans people and your advice and input. So be thinking about that. Well, Ankit, you and I don't play hockey. I'm hoping you do yoga so that we can have a sort of yoga hockey theme going on here. But Ankit, please tell us a little bit about you in your own words. And then just as the mighty Ella has done, what is on your mind, the two things that are on your mind June 2022 for this Pride celebration of uniqueness?
Thank you so much. It's such a great honor and privilege to be here. And namaste to everyone from Mumbai, India. So a little bit about myself. I am an LGBT rights activist. I have been active in the space of LGBT rights, primarily in Mumbai and in India for last 10 plus years now. I am one of the organizers, of course, along with many other activists and organizers who organizes Mumbai Queer Pride. And my work area focuses on three things primarily. One is diversity, equity, inclusion in classrooms, because we are in our school age when we discover ourselves being different. And if a correct information is not given to us, we may consider ourselves little less alone, isolated, to the extent there are chances that queer child may try to end their life because do not get the support they require. I'm one of that child who tried to end my life at the age of 17 because I could not find the stories to relate with. Right. So my first area of focus is on diversity, equity, inclusion in education. Second is diversity, equity, inclusion in workplace, wherein I do capacity building primarily of small scale business organizations or a family run organization, which are so many in India, along with, of course, companies. But companies, it's very easy for them to do the D&I journey, wherein it's much more difficult for a small scale business organizations or privately run, family run organizations in an Indian context to do this journey. So I have taken up that challenge to make them inclusive. And the third area of my work focuses on making faith inclusive and faith leaders understand the LGBTQIA plus community. So that's what my work primarily focuses on these three pillars. Now you asked me the question that what is there in my mind in June 2022. And what are the two things? One is very Indian context, and second is the global. In Indian context, I see that there are around 5 petitions filed in various high courts of our country, which is talking about marriage equality. And it's been going on for a year and a half now. Most of the petitioners are personal friend of mine, so we are in touch regularly. But the case is not going anywhere ahead. So, right, we got rid of criminalization of homosexuality in 2018 by Honorable Supreme Court of India. But what next? There is nothing next coming tangibly on our way in India, right? So I feel Anti-Discrimination Act passed by the Parliament and marriage equality followed by adoption rights is something is there in my mind. And in a global context, as we are in the month of June, currently the United Nations Human Rights Council sessions are going on, and the Human Rights Council 47 member body is going to vote on Office of Independent Experts on SOGI rights or LGBT rights. And I really hope that the renewal would happen, because that is the only office in the United Nations whole framework which actively looks after LGBT and queer rights. And we have been working as an activist globally to make that happen day and night. So these are the two thoughts in there in my mind. But on a subtitle or on a underneath all this, there is one little thought, and that is that yes, we are talking about LGBT rights. Yes, we are talking about inclusion. But to whom are we talking to? Are we talking to the same people who already are convinced, or are we reaching out to new set of people? Are we talking in our own echo chambers or people who disagree with us? And in case we are talking to people who disagree with us, are we able to have open heart and open mind to have diverse dialogue? Right? That's the topic of our discussion today, celebrating differences. So I think that we as a queer community is lacking that little sense of celebrating diversities within the queer community, and we are just keep talking to the people who are already on board. I really wish that we as a global LGBT community will expand our horizons and reach out to people who are not in our side and understand their concerns and address those concerns as well, so that we can truly make an inclusive society for all of us together.
Wow. Well, thank you, Ankit. That's very comprehensive. It's interesting that you and Ella share the legislative human rights element. So, two kind of shared points. And I think your input, I want to come back on echo chambers as we, as we make sure that we're not just talking to those who already get everything we say. I want to come back to that, if we may, Ankit. But I'd like now to have Nikki share a little bit about herself and the same question. What's on your mind? What makes June 2022 different and special? The couple of items that you'd like to have us talk about, Nikki, as you share what, is I think, important for those listening. And when we post this to a totally new audience, what you'd like to put out there?
Sure. And I'm going to start with that because otherwise I might forget. Having a little baby here, you know, I'm listening to conversation, trying to make sure she's okay. So my point, I'm going to go backwards. So we start with the 2 points, and it's basically, Ankit, as well, what you're saying there. And it's a lot of the work that I do within my company where I'm working now, is having those difficult conversations with people who have a different point of view. And I think it's really, really important. And that's why I want to iterate that again now, because I think that's exactly what you're saying. The most important thing is we're just maybe talking to the same people. I have the same thoughts when I talk about women in sport or women in tech or women in anything. We're going into the same group of people, all women. Well, we need some men in there as well. We need all different types of genders as well. We don't just need women. All right. So for me, that's the point. I think that's something that we need to really work on. And the second thing is, for now, because I've got family, already thinking about it before when I moved to Switzerland. So I live in Switzerland, and Ankit, back to you again. We've kind of just gone through the process of what you're hoping will happen in India. So we had the anti-discrimination law in 2019 go through with the referendum here in Switzerland, and we just had the marriage equality last year. So, and then adoption is part of that, and also access to reproductive health for women. In particular, gay men are left out in that, unfortunately, but hopefully that's going to come in the future. But we're getting there, and we did that quite rapidly in the last couple of years. It did take a long time, but that's something that I wanted to bring up as well, and something that needs to keep going also. And because when I'm looking at the future, and I'm looking at the last 2 years in particular, Ella, you also mentioned we've kind of regressed in so many countries as well. So we've gone forward, but we've also gone backwards in other countries. And that's something that needs to be looked at. And all of these rules and legislation that are going under the carpet while COVID happened is also something that has to be looked at very seriously, and how this happened. And let's not let that happen again, because for me, that is really just, I can't even believe some of the things that I've gone through while we were all suffering as a country, as a world together, and we're letting these things happen underneath. So that's the things that I would like to focus on. Family as well, but also a bit like your Ella and your health side of things, access for women to have, you know, it's our bodies. We want to be able to have a baby in the country that we're living in. And unfortunately, I was not able to do that. I had to go to Spain to do that. Now, that's going to change this year, but it's still going to take some time. And I think I would love the next people to be able to do that here in their own country. Bit about me. My name is Nikki Simmons. And as you probably gathered, I've just had a baby. She's 4 months old now, which is an amazing journey for me. We're actually thinking of writing a book about the journey we went through, because we had to do so many different avenues to try and make this happen, especially living here in Switzerland. So that's a side note. I'm a former international hockey player for Ireland. I played for 13 years, amazing years playing hockey. And then I also ended up working in the International Hockey Federation after that. So I was working in the digital world, promoting the athletes through a lot of different spaces, and trying to promote women in general as well, and trying to get the women's game as equal to the men's game, which was a really important job. But then I moved to the corporate world. 3 years ago, I moved to work in Philip Morris International, a massive change. But I just wanted to get working in the corporate world. And this company just kept on popping up in stories about the transformation it was going through. The communications department where I wanted to work in had a female leader. A senior vice president was just employed as the leader there. So I thought, let's go there, and made the move. It was a big, brave, bold move, because I was a teacher before, worked in sport, and then I went to work in corporate. But for me, it was something I wanted to bring my experience as an athlete, as an LGBTQ person as well, going into a corporate and being my true self, and letting me be a role model within the company, because there are not enough role models, especially higher up. Now, I'm not that senior. Hi, Ellie Sky. I'm not that senior, but I am trying my best to be a role model, to be out there, to be comfortable, especially my journey I've just had. I literally told the company from the start what I was doing. And this was, I felt so safe to do that. And I wish every company could do the same. So that's a bit about me in a small roundup. And as you can tell, I might have to bring Ellie Sky up here in a second. So. Sorry about that.
That is fantastic. And it's great that when you were talking, there's a little squeak from Ellie Sky. So obviously we're engaging our audience, which is amazing. I'd like to throw out the question. And, you know, it's always more interesting for our audience. And I'm not sure that we're talking to the same audiences, as I think you know, on social media. I have a large following, which is diverse across geography, across industries, and across backgrounds, genders, etc. So I always hope that we're touching the parts that other LinkedIn lives can't. But I want to throw this out there and say, you know, for those listening, what would you, and those participating, what would you like to see either straight allies, advocates, activists, those part of the community, what would you like to see us all be doing differently to ensure that we are reaching the parts that other community outreach isn't reaching? You know, you've all said this is an issue, so let's get some tangible kind of actions out there as to what you'd like to see us mere mortals and those who are not so mere really doing. So I throw that out, and feel free as we interject between each the other.
I think I'd say, just to kind of kick things off, to just listen. Like, listening, I think, is the absolute foundation of everything when it comes to allyship about any kind of identity or subject. Really listening to the people impacted by whatever topic that is, and really just listening to those lived experiences. Beyond that, I say be proactive with your education, seek out new material and new things that you want to learn about. You know, in the kind of corporate world at work, you know, we run so many events, especially now in Pride Month, so many events, and this gets asked a lot. You know, what else can allies do? How can I learn more? And I always say, just keep going, like extend this allyship into your like day-to-day life and your education into your day-to-day life. What's the way that we often learn most about people and about certain topics is through the kind of media that we digest, the books we read, the films we watch, the TV shows, the magazines, the people we follow on our social media accounts. I'd say just diversify what you're consuming as a media consumer. So check out some phenomenal documentaries and books and TV shows and all that kind of stuff about LGBTQ plus people, that has been recommended, I'd say, also by LGBTQ plus people, because not all of it is great. So definitely find some of the best stuff. And just digest it and have conversations about your day-to-day life. You know, take that home with your family and chat to your family about it, your friends, your colleagues, etc. So I'd say, yeah, start by listening, and then start by kind of learning more and going out there yourself to proactively learn more. And then the third thing I say is to show up, to actually show up. So if you're hearing that there is an absolute crisis around, for example, like conversion therapy, for example, in the UK, at the moment, which is a very hot topic at the moment. Attend protests, write to your MP, get directly involved as much as you can. And I would join that one up with the listening bit. Get involved as much as you can, but do that by listening to what the community actually needs. So yeah, that would be my kind of top 3 things for allies to do.
As usual, brilliant, Ella. And you've also been an amazing coach. One of the things that Ella has always helped me with is, even if you get in a pickle about something, if you lead with your heart and you're listening and you want to support and help, it's okay. It doesn't matter that you get a word wrong or you say something in the wrong context. If you're leading with your heart, if you are listening, learning, and showing up, then, you know, hopefully you'll get better. But heart counts in you know, celebrating a difference. And that gave me so much confidence. I can't tell you at the time. And so that's fantastic. We have a new member for the panel. It looks like we've been joined by the amazing Ellie Sky. We're thrilled to have you, Ellie Sky. Very few little people at your age can say they starred alongside Ella and Ankit and Mum on a Pride June 2022. But what do you think, Ankit and Nikki, that those who are listening in, those that we will broadcast this to at a later date, what actions can we be taking that augment what Ella has shared that is helpful for us out there campaigning with you?
So taking the hedge from Ella, she wonderfully talked about learning something and to start with listening. So when I hear the word action in my part of the world, there are three beautiful Sanskrit terminologies which talks about action. So by action in India, it is not just about the action, which it says manasa, vacha, karmana. Manasa means what you think, second what you speak, and third stage is the action. So I think that these are the three steps for any allyship as well, right? So what are we thinking, and our thought process will come from how are we dealing with people who are different from us. And once we start listening to them, as Ella rightly said, the learning process cannot happen till the time we are ready to unlearn what we have learned, right? We come with so much of baggage, we come with so much of prejudice. And when you approach any cause with a prejudice or pre-decided mind, you will not be able to grow. So all the wonderful straight people out there who are listening to this conversation, I would say that please come to the conversation of LGBT rights with open mind, that it's okay to unlearn and learn. So from your mind, be open. Manasa, from your mind, be open towards listening and co-learn together. Then Vacha, that being vocal as well is important. It's not just about that, oh, I support LGBT rights, but I don't want to speak about it. So Indian thought will tell you that, hey, just by supporting something from your mind or philosophical is not enough. The second stage is manasa. After manasa comes vacha. Vacha means vani, that means the speech. You need to be vocal about it. We all hold some area of influence, friends, don't we? You can be a co-worker in a small company, have 100 Instagram followers, to a celebrity like all of my co-panelists here have thousands of followers, right? Or a president or a prime minister of a country, right? Whatever area of influence you hold, I want you to utilize that. Come out of the closet as ally. The way queer community come out of the closet as queer. Why don't you also come out of a closet as an ally, right? And third is karmana. Karmana means being in action. So when you be vocal, whenever the opportunity comes, and then show your support in the pride. Donate your money to the queer cause. Put your money where your words are, where your mouth is, right? There are so many amazing queer activism happening. Queer refugee activism are happening, and charities are going on. Whatever is your choice in any part of the world, please support in action. So I think how to be a better ally is in a 3-step: with your mind, with your vocal words, and with your speech, and with your action. Manasa, vacha, karmana.
Yeah. And so much alignment there with Ella too. So what about Ellie Sky and Nikki? What is your call to arms for us all, or call to action?
Well, we think, I guess, Ellie Sky is only 4 months old, and already we talk to her about her story. You know, we tell her even when she was in my belly, or her story, and how she's part of a rainbow family. So for me, it's educating the youth, right? And I think Ankit, you do a lot of this as well. It's educating the youth, so we can do as much as we can in corporate. I also work. I'm leading the LGBT group in Philip Morris as well, and we can talk to people in our company. But if they're not passing the message on to people or outside them, in their team or outside the company, or their children, what's the point, right? We might be changing their mind a little bit, but they're not passing on that message. So for me, it's passing on the message, educating yourself, but then educating someone else. So yes, great, you know yourself, now pass it on. Pass on that knowledge knowledge transfer is something I'm a huge fan of, especially from being an athlete, but also my work now, making sure that when I was going on maternity leave, that I passed on all the knowledge I had to the next person who was especially looking after the LGBT group, for example. So that is really core of what I do every day, is passing on the knowledge. Don't keep it to yourself. Spread it down to go home, have a conversation at the dinner table with your teenager, with your 4-month-old, whatever it is. Make sure they're there at the table listening to the conversations. And that doesn't just mean for LGBTQ+, it's also any dimension of diversity, inclusion, anything. It doesn't even have to be. It can be just your colleague, you found out about something about them you didn't know about. Pass it on. Share the knowledge. Show that everybody's different. And this is our main conversation today. So that's my message from Ellie Skye.
Fantastic. And I'm going to be using rainbow family. I think that's a beautiful descriptor, and ensuring that Ellie Skye understands her part in the rainbow family is quite amazing. Now, I want to switch a little bit to role modeling. So I'd love to hear your stories, if you're happy to share, about who are some of your, role models, whether that's LGBTQ+, whether it's those in the wider community, who has helped inspire and strengthen you. Because all of you, as wonderful and upbeat and positive as you are, you have at times had very tough parts of your journey. I know less about Nikki and Ankit than I do about Ella, but in reading and researching, your incredible lives, they're not always as glowy and positive and upbeat as you thankfully present it now. So tell us a little bit about the role models that have helped you come through, shine at some of those darker times. Any one of you can dive in. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback, aren't we? Ooh, that was like a Dalek feedback. Let's Ankit, we're getting really bad feedback from you, I'm sorry to say. So let's see if we can fix that, and see if Ella and Nikki can dive in whilst we help Ankit with his bad feedback.
Yeah, I can make a start. So I think for me, there's not one person, there's not one like role model. And I think especially, growing up, I didn't really know any like older adult like queer people at all. Like that kind of role model just didn't really exist. So I think it's definitely been something that's kind of came later in life. And I've said this to people at work very recently in March for kind of the first time, but I actually think in terms of me coming out as trans and as non-binary a couple of years ago, one of the biggest things that helped me to have that realization and come to terms with my, my gender identity was actually the wonderful IBM trans and non-binary community. It really was. And I know it sounds super cheesy, but I work with them so closely and support any IBMer that comes out as trans through their transition. And I hold lots of education about the trans community and all that kind of stuff. And through that, and through just meeting such diversity across the kind of trans and non-binary identities, it really over time helped me to realize that actually this is me as well, and I have a place within this wonderful community. So I'd say they massively helped me on my journey, and that was really amazing. And actually in March earlier this year, I got to host an event and we talked about role models, and I was actually able to say this to them, which was really lovely and a really nice moment for me. And then kind of outside of that, I'd say I'm very lucky in terms of growing up and kind of more from my kind of teenage years onwards with having social media. I know there's so many pros and cons to social media, and I get that, and I get the damaging side of it and body image and all that kind of stuff. But knowing that I can follow so many like people who have similar experiences to me, who look like me, whose bodies are like mine, etc., etc., has been phenomenal and has made like we're talking earlier, and like Nikki was saying, about sharing knowledge and sharing knowledge about different pieces of terminology and what terms resonate differently for different people and how people understand their own identities and things like pronouns and all that kind of stuff really just helped me to better understand and better affirm who I am. So yeah, I'd say social media really helped. And through that, I've followed and connected with some phenomenal people and, you know, poets and artists and activists and all these phenomenal people. But I think social media has been a great way of kind of unlocking that and accessing all of those role models that I otherwise wouldn't necessarily have had.
Amazing. And it is incredible to hear social media framed in that way. I've heard you talk before about, you know, the community and its power. And thank you for sharing that, Ella. We're going to try, Ankit, to see if you can come in again without the Daleks.
Hello, am I audible?
Oh, yes.
All right, great. Yeah. So unfortunately, I don't roll with any of the models. But in terms of inspiration, I have taken a great inspiration from the story of Mahatma Gandhi. Personally, again, that is very close to my home. So his journey and his effort for the independence has really inspired me. Especially, there is this anecdote of Mahatma Gandhi's life when he was traveling in South Africa. He had a first-class ticket. He was thrown out of the first-class compartment because his skin color was not white. And that day, at that railway station where he was his luggage and he was thrown out of the first-class compartment, he decided that I'll fight the racism and this discrimination, right? And then from that place, he becomes, his actual birth name is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. So that in that event turned Mohan into Mahatma, a great soul, that literally means. So I feel the story of Mahatma Gandhi has inspired me. And in terms of queer people, I think that because, again, internet did not play a great role in my growing up. I come from a lower middle class family where internet was a luxury. So I had no access to internet till I was in my 17-year-old. I had no idea what internet was. Also, television was also a luxury. We used to have an old style antenna television. I don't know, many of you may not even know what that is these days, but I had growing up till I was 15-year-old. So I had no access to Western television and things like that. I just had a government broadcast with only 2 TV channels. So in terms of inflow of information was very limited. But when I came out, or when I discovered myself being different, I was able to accept myself because I saw so many people out there coming from a previous generation who found courage to come out. People like Umang Sheth, one of the founder of Gay Bombay organization, one of the first gay support group of India, or people like Pallav Bhatankar, again an LGBT rights activist, or people like Deepak for sure, right? These are the people I looked up, and they could find that courage to come out. Looking at them, I got the courage to come out. And I am out. And I hope that by looking at me, an Ankit, 17, 16-year-old Ankit in a tier 2, tier 3 city of India will find the courage to come out. So I don't have any role models per se, but Mahatma Gandhi and queer community leaders of my country, because they were accessible to me and they found the courage in much more difficult time to come out, inspired me to come out and accept myself.
Thank you so much for that. And we've got Nikki and Ellie Skye back. We're talking about role models on our June Pride Month panel. Nikki, I think there are people who wonder whether it was another athlete. Tell us a little bit about your kind of rock star role models.
I'm afraid Ellie Skye is crying.
Oh, don't worry.
I'll come back in 1 minute.
Yeah. When Ellie Skye says it's okay, you can put up your hand and we'll come straight back to you. Yeah? Okay, so we've got some super questions coming in. I think some people have been quite inspired around these sort of echo chambers, and how do we reach the parts that others don't reach, particularly in these times of, you know, as Nikki rightly said, during COVID, lots of, you know, oppressive regulatory and community actions. So what do you think, you know, Ella, you operate in a global sphere. Ankit, you're also with the UN, quite global, but anchored in India. What do you think is the most important piece of, you know, legislative reversal or action in the courts or in the land that you would like to see this year changed in terms of impact on many and continuing us to be open and respectful of all?
I think that's a huge question, very hard to answer and to pick one. But I think, you know, we have 71 countries where being LGBTQ plus is criminalized around the world. 71. Like, I read that stat the other day, and like I knew it was about that number, but just reading it the other day, I had to Google it again because I was like, wait, are we still that high? We are. You know, so I think that is huge. And in some of those countries, it's punishable by death. In others, it's imprisonment. For some, like 14 years. For some, it's a physical punishment as well. You know, there's horrific things happening in those 71 countries. But I think there's so many different layers to legislation and to where we're currently at, because you have those 71 countries where it's criminalized. You have other places where you have things like marriage equality, and to pick on the UK because I'm here, you know, you have things like marriage equality here and stuff, and that's fantastic. But yet there was a debate in Parliament on Monday about whether a conversion therapy ban should include trans people or not. Which is still just a horrific thing that we even have to have that conversation and that debate. The fact that it's not automatically going to be a blanket ban and this conversation even has to happen is horrific. Similarly, when we look into the US, obviously in the US and the way that politics works over there is very different to here in the UK. And so much of it is done on a state-by-state basis, which means that the consistency is not there in the protection for the LGBTQ plus community. And I know that the Equality Act is something that many organizations and NGOs have been pushing for and lobbying for its passage for many years. That really would be groundbreaking and really phenomenal for LGBTQ plus equality in the US. Without that, we are seeing this ongoing increase every year, and it is getting worse and worse. This year is a record-breaking year for anti-LGBTQ plus bills being put forwards. And a lot of those are specifically anti-trans bills. A lot of them are focused on trans youth. They're focused on trans youth being able to access sport. And as we all know, you know, sport is so good for our mental health and so good for making friends and fitting in and all that kind of stuff. And if from such a young age, you're excluding that kid and not letting that kid play for the team that aligns with their identity, it can just be so detrimental to that person's mental health. And as we know, you know, I think it's a staggering statistic, like 40% of trans people have attempted suicide. So it's so key that we get the support right. And so there's lots of legislation out there and there's lots of improvement that can be done. But yeah, I'd say from a US perspective, I'd say the Equality Act coming forward would be phenomenal and would stop that kind of patchwork stuff that's been happening in kind of recent years. But yeah, there's still, those 71 countries that still criminalize being LGBTQ plus. So it really does vary vastly around the world.
Absolutely. Great response, Ella. Ankit, I'm probably going to interrupt you when Nikki comes back in, which might mean that Ellie Skye likes what we're saying as opposed to crying, bless her. But, you know, you said at the very start that the whole human rights element and the next steps in progress, what would be the issue that you would flag? And if Nikki comes back in with Ellie Skye, let's jump to her, because I think we're going to have to work around mum and babies. So what's the number one thing in India in terms of legislative next steps, Ankit?
It's always a pleasure to work around moms. In terms of India, I think first of all we need an anti-discrimination act. So, if we talk about the current state of India, there are so many business organizations who have active anti-discrimination policies in place. But as of now, it is by choice. It is not mandatory by law, right? So, we as an LGBT rights activists do lobby with various business organizations, and some just out of a sheer feeling of foremost, that's feeling of not left out, they are also doing just because other companies are doing it. But it is very limited to a privileged multinational company having operations in India. And the business organization which I tap upon are not mostly international multinational companies, but a smaller scale organizations and small business units. And that is where majority of Indian economy is coming from. Most of the people are working, right? So what happens to employee working at a supermarket or at a shopping mall, right? Is he being discriminated? Yes, if I'm an IBM employee, Google employee, irrespective of I'm in India or the US, I'm protected. But what if I am not one of those, right? So if there would be an Anti-Discrimination Act passed by the Parliament, which will be applicable to all business organizations, all educational institutions, everyone, then it will be a much more of an help. So that is something which comes very first in my mind if I talk about legislative changes in India. And the second is the marriage equality petition, which are undergoing in various high courts of the country. My guess is this all will end up in Supreme Court. A big legislative change like this doesn't get free of it, like in challenges. So I think that whatever the outcome of the High Court would be, in our experience, that's what happened in the decriminalization of homosexuality as well. A lower court decriminalized it. Again, it was challenged in the Supreme Court. So I think this will also go to the Supreme Court. We don't know how long it takes. In India, we say that it takes years and years to complete a legal cases in India. So I hope that that happens soon. So that these are the two things on top of my head: Anti-Discrimination Act by the Parliament and marriage equality by the courts.
Thank you so much, Ankit. And we're still hoping. Here she is, Nikki. So it's now a good time to share a couple of things for you, your role models, and then there's been a few questions about what advice would you give a professional athlete about coming out. But whilst Ellie Sky is quiet, I'll hand to you.
Yeah, hopefully she'll stay quiet if I start talking, but we'll see. Sorry about that, but thank you for waiting for me. Role models, I think, going back a bit like Ella said, there wasn't that many, growing up. There wasn't so much people on TV or anything like that in that space, in that community. So for me, it was more local. And I was very grateful to be part of a hockey team and the sport of hockey, because hockey is very inclusive from the start. And even in most countries, I find it very, very inclusive and on a global scale. So I was really grateful to be part of that sort of sport, where I could have some role models within the sport that I could look up to, that I could, maybe start thinking as a teenager who I am, what's happening, and all these things that were happening to all of us in our teenage years. So I did have that, and even cricket. I played cricket as well, so I had a few role models there. But I came out when I was 21, and to my friends and family and to my team and all of that, and that was fine, and I was just myself. And it was obviously hard for me, a personal struggle, but I was also very grateful. I had people around me. My family were very helpful, very supportive, so I was really lucky in that way. But then growing up, I guess you see all the different types of things. You start going out into the city, and you have some abuse on the streets and things like that. And so it gets a bit more difficult. But I still continued to be myself, to make sure that I was, doing that in my sport as well. And everyone knew who I was. When I was 31, I was retiring at 31, I decided to go on a TV show. Well, they asked me to go on the TV show and it called Second Captains, and talk about it. And I ended up being the first female sport athlete in Ireland to kind of talk about it out loud and come out as such. But I was out since I was 21. But sure, that that just showed me that there was no role models, right? Because I was the first one 10 years later to come out publicly. So for me, it was like I felt a responsibility because I didn't have so many role models. I mean, the thing I used to watch was the L Word growing up. I mean, that was one thing that helped me to come out and be myself. But which I can't wait for the next season of Gen X to come. But L Word was something that we had, but nothing else really. So I felt a responsibility, as I mentioned, to come out and talk about it and show that it was okay. And since then, we have a lot more girls in sport now in Ireland that talk about it more. So it's really great. And I still get messages every year that I post, that moment that I did it on TV, and I still get messages saying, "Oh, I remember that. Thank you so much. It really helped me." So that's really cool. And then in regards to legislations and what you're just talking about, I think the one thing is going back to family. So for me is reproductive medicine and health and help for people who want to have families, because it's really, thinking back on my journey and our journey to get to have Ellie Skye, it's really difficult because there's so many avenues that you have to go, so much red tape you have to go through. Do you do it because people might say something? There's so many things that you have to think about, except apart from, having a child, which a normal family do. You have so many different things, like, will we be accepted? Will we this? Will people say something? Will they ask questions? How, they're always asked, like, who carried the baby or who's going to carry the baby? You get so many things extra on top of than a normal couple that are having a family. So for me, it's that, and access to the health as well, and support around it, because it's great having access to be able to have a family. But what about all the things that I'm talking about that come afterwards? Like right now in Switzerland, Sandra, I'm a single mom. I want to just talk about this a little bit. I'm a single mom in on Ellie Skye's birth cert. And meanwhile, we've been together for almost 10 years. Civil partnership in France. We don't have a civil partnership here yet because we were waiting till the marriage equality to go through. So we did it in France. And so basically I'm a single mom in the eyes of the law. And it was really sad. Like every time I now see her birth cert, it's like just me on it. I have to go through so many different things now I'm doing her passport. I'm a single mom for that. There's all these different things, like her family allowance as well. It's like, oh, what's your partner? What does your partner do? And then I say all the things and they're like, oh, but it's a woman. I'm like, yeah. So it's just you, then you're single. So you have all these things that come up all the time. So I think on top of just having the medicine, it's the mental health side of it as well. And I think that's something to bring up as across all of LGBT issues, but the mental health side of things and support in that side, because that is one thing that I felt like, oh, I'm strong, I can do this, and then I start getting, little small cuts, little things like, oh, where's the husband? Where is this? And they're small things, but they build up. And then it upsets me. And this week I was actually feeling very tired. I was like, I wonder what's wrong. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been going through this whole process with insurance, with everything, with allowance, work, everything. Work have been amazing, but it's the laws. And I think that's the main thing I would want to talk about more. And same in Ireland, like I'm from Ireland. We have these rules, but there still takes time for the partner to adopt the child. It's not straight away. So this is something we'll have to go through in a year's time, where Sandra will have to have an interview. They'll have to come here to the house, all of these things to make sure that we're together, make sure that she's looking after the child before we can adopt. So that's
it's so wonderful that you're able to share what you're going through and hopefully inspire other people who want to create this amazing rainbow family. I think it's very special. We didn't anticipate having you and Ellie Skye with us, but I think you've added an incredible dimension. We're coming to the end of our time. I just want to go back around the table. I'll start with Nikki, because obviously Ellie Skye kind of likes what she's saying right now, because we've got some piece. So just one simple message that you would like to sign out with. We will share this broadcast with some of the amazing points that you've made, but just one final little statement, not a lecture, but a final statement that you'd like to share out there, starting with Nikki and Ellie Skye, to everyone who wants to learn and support you and others like you, Nikki?
Well, I think I'm going back to what I said before. Learn yourself, but then pass on the message. Pass it down to the youth, pass it down to around the dinner table. Just get those conversations going and really pass what you've learned on. I think that's the main thing for me, because if you keep it to yourself, it's no good, right? You can stand up, but I want you to pass on the message to everyone around you, old, young, all the way down to 4 months old.
Fantastic. Ella, what is your message as we
picking one message is always hard. No, I'd say, when we have these conversations and when people like to have kind of debates or conversations, I think it's important to remember that these are real people. These are our human rights at the end of the day, and these are our human lived experiences, and they come above anything else. We really need to just be listening and respecting the lived experiences of others. So have a good listen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Ankit, one final comment and input from you?
So I will also go back to what I shared earlier, and that is, we really need to come out. All of us need to come out of the closet. If we are queer, then come out as queer. The world is wonderful out there. We need more and more inspirations of queer people. But if you are a supporter, if you're an ally, please come out as an ally as well. Allies coming out of the closet is equally important as much as queer people coming out of the closet.
Fantastic. Well, I felt well and truly out for most of my life, and always trying, as Ella and Nikki and Ankit have shared, to learn, relearn, unlearn, to lead with your heart, and to really be expanding the community that truly understand our unique differences. We all have unique differences. Some you can see, some you can't. So it's important to listen, to learn, to support. Some amazing statistics and facts have come out today. I don't think there'll be another Pride event that will have had a vocal Ellie Skye on it. So we feel blessed by that contribution. But I want to thank you all for giving the time, for sharing. For me, trust is about authenticity. Your authenticity is extraordinary. Your empathy for others, which is amazing. Your logic. You've all been so logical and practical, and together that builds trust. So a very, very big thank you. We'll share this with a number of comments for those who didn't get to see it live. That's usually where we get the bigger audience. And here's to an amazing, not just Pride Month, but an ongoing Pride year where we reverse some of the horrors, frankly, of this vortex of change, and be well together moving forward. So a very big thank you to all of those who've joined and all of our amazing guests. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.